Hey everybody, it's Will Pulgarin. It's great to see you guys tonight. But the presidents are important to remember because during the 1920s, the United States returns to this period of Republican rule. All these three presidents were Republican. And Hoover in 1929 becomes president of the United States. And that's where we're going to start, is with Hoover's presidency. Now, I'm going to advise you guys, one thing is studies show that when you write things down, you're way more likely to remember it. So I know you might be tempted to just take some screenshots and kind of jump in and out of there. But I'm telling you, if you write things down, information, it's going to be awesome. I have actually a document that I'm going to share with you guys for free that's going to have all this information. But I do recommend making a title here, Fiveable Stream on this day and writing this down. It shows that you're way more likely to remember it. Okay, so let's start. So the stock market crash. Now all right. Yes, they will be attached to the presentation. So Chantel, you guys will have access to this. Perfect. So here's a picture of Herbert Hoover, and Herbert Hoover becomes president in 1828. He wins the election of 1828, is inaugurated in 1929. And he says in his inaugural address, "In no nation is the government more worthy of respect. No country is more loved by its people. I have an abiding faith in their capacity, integrity, and high purpose. I have no fears for the future of our country. It is bright with hope." Now, what's unique about that is that there's another event that's going to happen in 1920. Here's the president of the United States saying that the future is bright with hope. And what else is going to happen in 1929, sorry. All right, Susanna, you got it. Saba, you got it. Perla, Sierra, excellent. TJS, perfect. The market crash. So a couple months after Herbert Hoover says that the future is bright with hope, the stock market is going to crash. And this event is going to completely change whatever ideas he had for his presidency. So Herbert Hoover gets elected 1928. In 1929, he gives this inaugural address that the future is bright with hope. And a couple months later, the stock market crashes. Now, what caused the stock market crash? There's a couple things, and I want to talk about what are the underlying causes. So first, as you guys mentioned, in the 1920s, it was an era of Perla, can you guys hear me? Sorry, guys. Okay. Sorry, guys. If it keeps coming in and out, just let me know in the chat, and I can go back and review anything. Excellent, Sierra. Jenny, welcome, Jenny. So just let me know so I can make sure that I can bring you in. So the stock market crash, what happened here? And the stock was it was a stock-based economy, meaning that people were basically buying parts of companies. It was a superficial prosperity, meaning that people could buy things that they didn't really own. Imagine if, like, I have a credit card and I go out and I buy all these jewelry and all these things. It's going to look to people like I'm rich. But how did I buy that? By accumulating debt. And that's exactly what was happening in the 1920s. There was an unequal distribution of income. Some people had a lot of money, some people didn't. There was problems in the industry, and in the farm sector. There was increasing consumer debt, and there was stock market speculation, which led to the crash. That means people kept thinking that the stock market was going to keep going up and up and up and up, and it was never going to crash. And so when it did crash, people lost money that didn't really belong to them. And so we have this thing called Black Tuesday, which leads to the stock market crash in 1929. Black Tuesday, October 29th, 1929. Okay, that is known as Black Tuesday. So what happens there? A lot of people think, well, that's the day the Depression started. Well, that was the day that the selling of stocks and the fall of the stock market really began. So let's look at this real quick. I made this chart for you guys, and I want to look at what's going on before the stock market crash. So we have the stock market crash here in 1929, and let's look at what's going on before. This is the unemployment rate. Now, in an average economy, in a good economy, the unemployment rate is about 5%. So if you would look right here, this is 5%, this is 10%, 15%, 20%, and so on. And so if you look right here, when the stock market crashes in 1929, what is unemployment at? What do you guys see it there? Can somebody put it in the chat? Perfect, Sierra, 5%. Excellent. Jack, thank you. Oh, sorry, Jack. Just if it should come in and out. If you refresh, you might give it a chance to make a better connection. So yeah, it was a 5%. So when the stock market crashes in 1929, things are going well. But look at the jump that happens from 1929 to 1930. It's about, I would say, 14%. So 9% are out of work. So when the stock market crashes in 1929, Herbert Hoover's president. So the question is, what is Herbert Hoover going to do? Well, let's look. Oops, sorry, I think I made, okay. So Herbert Hoover was kind of a unique guy. He had a belief in, and these are important words that are of why Herbert Hoover failed to take care of the Great Depression. Herbert Hoover believed in this rugged individualism. This is the idea that people should succeed through their own efforts, that they should never get help or get very little help from the government. The idea is that you pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. I'm not going to do it. You're going to do it. And that's how Herbert Hoover saw. So when the stock market crashed, he kind of sat back and he said, no, people can do this. People can get themselves out. But obviously it was bigger and people started to really suffer. Hey guys, how's the pace so far? Okay? Thumbs up if it's okay. All right, perfect. Good. Thank you, Jackie. All right, Charlotte. Thank you. So he believed in rugged individualism. A couple years later, he had to change that approach. And he said, okay, obviously this depression is not going well, so I have to get involved. So in 1931, the year before the election, Hoover begins to appeal to Congress to pass reforms, to change things up in banking, the mortgage relief, and funnel money into business, because he sees like, okay, this thing's getting worse. I have to do something. Kind of like what's going on right now with the coronavirus. People are like, oh, well, you know, what are we going to do? We have to do something because things are going to get worse. People are going to lose their houses. They're going to lose their money, mortgage. All these things are going to happen. So at some point, the government has to get involved. Then Herbert Hoover was not a very likable guy. And in 1932, he has another incident that makes him even more unlikable. And it's this episode with the bonus army. Now, these were veterans from World War I that showed up in the middle of the Great, not in the middle of it, but at the beginning of the Great Depression, 1932. About 10 to 20,000 of them showed up in Washington, D.C., and they were demanding a bonus check. They fought in World War I. They said the government promised us pay, and they never delivered. So they will go all the way to Washington, D.C. And think about this. These were people that fought in World War I. These are veterans of the United States. And Herbert Hoover wants nothing to do with them. He's like, I'm not going to talk to them. I'm not going to deal with them. And he actually sends U.S. troops to disband them. Disband this bonus army. And the troops fire, they attack and gas these people, and more than 1,000 people die. And so, I'm sorry, they attack with more than 1,000 people, not 1,000 people die. I'm sorry. Not that many people died. But exactly, Jaslyn, that looked extremely bad for the president. Here's Hoover already struggling. And now the worst thing you can do is attack veterans. And that's exactly what he did. And he attacked veterans. I'm going to look real quick. I got to get the exact number of the bonus army because now it's going to bother me if I don't get it. Okay, so 2 people were shot and many were injured, and 11-month-old baby died, which is not great optics for Herbert Hoover, and already people are not liking him. All right. Yes, we're going to talk about that, Jack, why these things became known as Hoovervilles. So here's 1931. Man, Jack, you're like on top of this, man, because we're right where we're going to be. So right in 1931, here's Herbert Hoover attacking the bonus army people, and Americans are suffering. Unemployment right here is about 25%. So remember, 5% is normal, and in 1931, it's at 25%. People are standing in soup kitchens. Here's where Jack talked about shanty towns, where these houses that people made out of cardboard, out of anything they could find in the streets, and then people renamed them Hoovervilles after President Herbert Hoover. And people were also standing in line for soup and bread. And Hoover pockets and flags are. So yeah, in 1931, things were not looking good for Herbert Hoover. It's not good to have your country people standing in line to get soup, to get food, living in shanty towns, and conditions were even worse for African Americans and Latinos. All right, so real quick, I want to do a little pause. Tell me, what is the normal unemployment rate? Okay, perfect, 5%. What is rugged individualism would Herbert Hoover believe? Just a quick definition. Exactly, perfect. Jackie, you got it. People should pull themselves up. The government should not be helping them to do that themselves. Who were the 3 presidents in the 1920s? Charlotte, exactly. Pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, little government. Harding, Coolidge, and Hoover, perfectly. Now, this is why it's going to be important. For the entire 1920s, the decade of the 1920s, 3 Republican presidents were in charge. And now we get to this election in 1932. And this is kind of what's happening now with Donald Trump. Now, I hate to bring everything back, but we're kind of living through a very, very unique moment in time, that it's really hard to get reelected when unemployment is high. And because if unemployment is at 5%, it's a great economy, things are going well. As unemployment climbs, it gets harder and harder to become be reelected. And Herbert Hoover in 1932, unemployment was about 37%. 37% of the people were unemployed. Exactly. He just has it. That's not good. And he's running against a guy who, by all means, is a better speaker than he is. And Mahfouz, say welcome back, my friend. Welcome back. All right. The reason they didn't put it on the stream is because they know that, so many people would come on this stream that it would crash. No, I'm just kidding, guys. No, it's so awesome to be with you guys tonight. I can't tell you how awesome it is. So anyway, I want to go back to the election 1932. The election 1932, Saba, I don't think so. You're too nice. All right. So the election of 1932 showed that Americans were ready for a change because of the Great Depression, people were suffering from a lack of work, food, and hope. And so here we have Herbert Hoover from the Republican Party running against Franklin D. Roosevelt from the Democratic Party. Now, although Republicans nominated Hoover, he was the sitting president after all, they recognized that he had little chance of winning. And so FDR won the election in 1932, capturing nearly 23 million votes to Hoover's 16 million. And back then, that's it, Derek. I love it. You have nothing to fear but fear itself. And Jack, thank you guys for being here. Oh, man, you guys. All right. So here's one of the most famous pictures is in 1932, You got elected in November and you were inaugurated in March. So that was 4 months of waiting. And people were ready for FDR, Franklin D. Roosevelt, I'm going to call him FDR, was to take charge. And Franklin Roosevelt became the 32nd president, but 4 months would pass between his victory and his inauguration. Eventually, the 20th Amendment, so this is important, the 20th Amendment moved presidential inaugurations to January. Why? Because people realized that waiting 4 months after an election is way too much, because they felt it with Roosevelt. So now here's a famous picture of Herbert Hoover on this side and Franklin Roosevelt on this side. And this is the day Franklin Roosevelt is getting inaugurated. And I really love this picture, this cover of the New Yorker, where it has Herbert Hoover with like a skull in his face. And here's Franklin Roosevelt with the smile. And what do you think? I mean, think about the time that's happening. Think about the time that's happening with that in the Great Depression. And for this person to have a smile, what do you think that communicates to people? Think about it. This is a depression. It provides hope. Sierra, exactly. It's hopeful, Charlotte. And so this is why this cover is so important, because people are saying, look, things are bad. And here's this guy, FDR, with the smile. Camilo, welcome to the stream. Awesome. So now Franklin Roosevelt becomes president, and he's going to implement the New Deal. All right. So let's look at FDR's New Deal. First, where does this word come from? It comes from one of his speeches when he says, I pledge to you, I pledge myself a new deal for the American people. And this word New Deal becomes the name of his new program. He says the test of progress is not whether we add more to the abundance of those who have much. It is whether we provide enough for those who have to live. And so Franklin Roosevelt here is going to take a different approach than Hoover. Hoover was more hands-off. FDR is going to be more hands-on, and that's going to make a huge difference. Now, real quick, what is the unemployment rate when FDR becomes president here in 1933? Approximately. I know it's kind of hard to see. Yeah, exactly. It's about 38%. Okay. So 38% unemployment. People have been unemployed for a couple of years. There's a lot of suffering going on. And so when FDR takes charge, he launches a period of intense activity known as 100 days. And I think somebody brought this up here. Mahfouz brought it up, that during the first 100 days of FDR's administration, he's going to launch into a period of tremendous activity. So let's look at what he did. Well, first, one of the things that he does is he delivers a fireside chat. Does anybody know what a fireside chat is? Okay, Humin. So this is very important that you guys know this, because Roosevelt, up to that time, right now, Trump communicates via Twitter. Ronald Reagan was great on TV. And FDR was great on the radio. And on the radio, he was able to talk to people about what was going on. And so imagine that people during that time, they're suffering. They turn on the radio and they can actually hear the president of the United States talking to them about what was going on. And one of my favorite things is that he began almost all his fireside chats with "my friends." And something about that just makes me feel like, all right, hey, he's my friend, right? Like, he starts it off with "my friends." He's talking to the American people, and his voice is soothing. And Mahfouz is exactly right. It made people feel like he actually cared and heard their concerns. And so he issues fireside chats, and his first one is about the banking system. And he talks to people about banking, why they shouldn't pull their money out of the bank, why the deposits are going to be protected. And he talks in very common language. He's not talking like a college professor. He's talking to people like your average person who's selling bread, who's selling this, and they understand him and they feel connected to him. All right. So the fireside chats are also instrumental when FDR becomes president. Yes, Derek, you're absolutely right. He's going to close the banks. And that's what his first fireside chat was about. It was called the bank holiday, explaining what he was doing. So let's go here. So FDR turns to the New Deal, and this is very important, and I want you guys to write this down, because FDR has, and I'm going to share finally what I was going to share with you guys, the New Deal agencies. If you guys see right below me, there's a couple, there's a handout there, and these are the New Deal agencies that you guys can get. All right, so FDR's New Deal is comprised of the 3 R's, and this is a great way to remember it, okay? First, he wanted to provide relief, immediate action to halt the economy's deterioration. He wanted to help people recover, and he wanted to reform. Correct. Perla, it was just one banking holiday. Correct. It was just one day. That's a great question. And he did that because he wanted to make sure that the day that they opened, that the next day only the banks that had money would be okay. Let me take a drink here. So FDR had his New Deal comprised of the 3 R's. I'm going to tell you something. I graded for the AP a couple of years ago, and there was a question about the New Deal. And basically, the way you give points on the AP exam is they give you a list of things that if kids mention it, or students mention it, sorry, not kids, young adults, they mention it, then you give them points. And one of the things there was relief, recovery, and reform. And every essay that I read, every student that included the 3 R's usually passed that part of the FRQ. So remember, he provided relief, he wanted to help people recover, and he wanted to reform it so this wouldn't happen again. So here's a picture. Here's the picture of FDR. Now, what is happening around? Remember, when you look at the picture of the AP exam, when you look at a political cartoon, know that every word on a political cartoon counts. So what are these things going on? All right, Jack, you're on it, man. Exactly. These were the agencies he created under the New Deal. And so the New Deal programs created to meet these goals generated jobs and, more importantly, hope. They also generated what we refer today as alphabet soup, a series of acts and agencies that created a huge federal bureaucracy. So he's going to create all these agencies. Now, I'm going to tell you, I've been teaching history for about 17 years, and I still can't remember all of them. So the expectation on the AP exam is not that you're going to remember all these agencies that I shared with you below, is that you remember a couple. And so let's look at a couple. Jackie, oh, wow, Jackie, that's a good pun right there. What a relief. And we're talking about relief. That's pretty good. All right. That's pretty good. So at least remember a couple. All right. So when we talk about companies, agencies under the New Deal that were there to provide relief, we can talk about the Civilian Conservation Corps. The CCC provided jobs and relocated for young men in rural settings. So basically what FDR does is he tries to just create all these things to put people back to work, to help people recover, and then to change the system. And so the CCC is an example of that. The WPA, the Works Progress Administration, this agency provided jobs to young men to build schools, hospitals, and other public works. The TVA, the Tennessee Valley Authority, the TVA provided jobs building dams and improving existing ones so that electricity could be brought to the rural areas of the country, particularly the Deep South. So these 3 agencies are 3 things that you can remember for relief. Recovery. So how do you help people recover that they've lost their job, they lost their house? First, he passed the FHA, the Federal Housing Act. This act helped repair, rebuild, and insure older homes. So people could stay in their home, fix them up, and bring plumbing to them, and so on. The AAA, Agricultural Adjustment Association. The AAA limited farm production to help raise prices, paid for taxing food processors declared unconstitutional. Okay, we're going to talk about that because the court is going to come on a little bit later. The NYA, the National Youth Administration. The NYA helped keep youth in school with 500 and helped in colleges and 600,000 in high schools. The reforms. So how did they change the system to ensure that this would never happen again? No, Perla, that's absolutely not, because you that's a great question. So Perla's question is, if you bring up the AAA and the NRA, not the NRA, AAA and FHA, NRA, yeah, me too. I always think about that as well. It's a good way to remember it. AAA is for recovery, and they help you recover. I don't know. There's got to be some way to remember it. So the FHA, these are, even though they were challenged by the courts, the AAA, it's still important and it's still good information that you can bring up. So reform. So remember this, the economy crashed. So FDR wants this never to happen again. So he passes, and these acts completely changed it, where they still are valid in our lives. The Social Security Administration. There were a bunch of old people during that time that were homeless, that had no money, the handicapped. And this was, to FDR, disgraceful. How is this country not taking care of old people and the handicapped? So the Social Security Administration, and widows, people left without husbands. So he passed this, and eventually it was expanded now that all old people can essentially receive Social Security. The SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, this regulated the stock market. So you can't just buy stocks without money. It has to be backed up by something. And the FDIC, this is the ensures savings of bank depositors and monitor soundness. For example, if I go to a bank and the bank goes bankrupt because they run out of money, the FDIC protects my money, and the government backs up the loan. So for example, if you give your friend $100 and you say, hey man, I need you to pay me back. And he says, I'm good for it. Plus, if I can't pay you back, my parents got you. And their parents have really good jobs. Are you going to feel a little bit more secure that he's going to pay you back? Well, that's kind of a self-evident question. Yeah, you're going to feel more secure. Sorry, guys. That might not be the best example, but you see what I'm saying. Is when somebody is backed up by something, you feel more confident. No, it doesn't stop people from using credit, but it does allow the SEC does control people from essentially how would I say it, like making fraudulent purchases, making information up, and so on. There was a senator a little while ago, this just happened right before the coronavirus, that he got a tip that basically that the stock market was going to fall, and he sold off a bunch of his stocks. And the rest of us, we didn't know that information. And so it's up to the Securities and Exchange Commission and other agencies to come in there and control that. So I'm going to take a couple questions because I'm moving a little fast and I see that it's filling up. So Jackie, what does buying on margin mean? So buying on margin means that you don't have enough money to cover the stock. And so you have just enough money. So I want to buy a car, and the car is $20,000, and I have $19,990. So I'm buying it right there. Like, that's all I got. And the only hope I have is that the stock's going to go up. If the stock goes down, then I don't have enough money to cover the losses. And this is a practice that people were doing, buying on margin. A great one. All right. So guys, sorry, I've been kind of going fast. How are you guys doing? Thumbs up, thumbs sideways, thumbs down. All right, Sierra's doing well. All right, TJS, thank you. Camilo, you still here? Raymond, Mafus. All right, excellent. So let's look at what happens when they implement the New Deal. So FDR implements the first New Deal in 1933. We said unemployment was about 37%. We have the 3 R's. What are the 3 R's? No, Paige, there is no multiple choice this year on the test. Exactly. Relief, recovery, and reform. And he passes the relief, recovery, and reform. And look at what starts to happen to the unemployment rate. What starts to happen there by 1936? It starts to decline. But what is that? What is the unemployment rate in 1936? Approximately 26%. Perfect. And so we said average unemployment is 5%. And so is this still a good situation? Can we say that the New Deal is having a great impact on America? No, you're right. I'm sorry to ask these kind of questions, but I want you guys to pay attention. It did go down, but not enough. Think about all this money that FDR and the government are spending, and really unemployment dropped to about 26%. So it's still not great. So FDR runs for re-election again, and he wins in 1936. He becomes president. You're right, Jack. It does help prevent it. And a lot of people, we're going to talk about that, are going to start to criticize the New Deal. Okay? But in 1936, he runs for re-election. He wins. And then he passes a second New Deal in 1937. Now, a couple of people begin to criticize the New Deal. And first, they're saying that the government is spending a lot of money. It's called deficit spending, when the government spends more money than it receives. This $2 trillion tax cut that just passed, it's deficit spending by the Trump administration. And so this practice is not good, because it basically means that the government is borrowing money. It's using more money than it's bringing in. When challenged with that, FDR said, well, deficit spending is a necessary evil to be used as only during times of great economic crisis. And maybe Trump could say the same right now. That's why we had to pass this this $2 trillion stimulus package, because these are extraordinary times with the coronavirus and stuff. And so some critics thought FDR spent too much time on direct relief, and that the New Deal policies, that he wanted to take control of businesses and socialize the economy. And so people were afraid that he was going to essentially take control and turn America into a socialist country. So let's see. All right, let's look at the questions. Yeah, that's a great point, Charlotte. You're going to see that deficit spending can impact the economy as well. Yeah, and we're going to look at that in a sec. Perla, wait, how can there be a recession in a depression? That sucks. That's right. Well, so think about it like this. The economy's good. You fall into a recession. And if you don't stop a recession, you fall into a depression. Okay? And so you can go back up to a recession and then fall back down to a depression. Okay? So Jackie, the main difference, that's true, it does rhyme. A recession is when the economy slows down, but it's still going slowly, but it's not bad. But a depression is high unemployment and and other effects like foreclosures and so on. Okay, so FDR, because remember, we have a system of checks and balances, and the Supreme Court starts to strike down much of the New Deal, calling it unconstitutional. So FDR decides to do something. He says, well, I want to stack the Supreme Court with more justices. I want to appoint justices to the Supreme Court. And so in 1937, FDR proposed a court reform bill to reorganize the federal judiciary and allow him to appoint 6 new Supreme Court justices. This was known as the court stacking scheme, and it was not very popular. Why do you think that wouldn't be popular? Oh, Perla, look at that. I put exactly what you put. It messed up with the system of checks and balances, too much influence. It's basically the president, Perla, good job, taking over and trying to take control of the other branch of government. Susanna, exactly. It's too much influence. Then you have three people that come out and they begin to criticize him. First is Father Charles Coughlin, who turned against the New Deal, and because it did not nationalize the banks and it did not guarantee an annual income. And so far, Father Charles Coughlin says the New Deal doesn't go far enough. So FDR is getting criticism from this side, from his own constituents, the left, the Democrats. Dr. Francis Townsend believed the New Deal did not go far enough to help the elderly. And finally, Huey Long proposed a share of wealth program that would give every American something. And so people are criticizing FDR now, saying he's not going far enough. The Supreme Court saying you're going too far. And so FDR is kind of stuck in this not very good position. So we got about 12 more minutes, guys. You guys hanging in there? There were demagogues. Oh, that's a great question, Perla. You know what? I don't know. That's a good question. Wow. All right, yeah, Mahfouz. The fact that he wanted to appoint liberal judges, he knew what he was doing. You're right. Absolutely. All right. So, guys, hang in there with me. 12 more minutes. And if you haven't gotten the New Deal agencies below, make sure you get that so you can have for your study notes. So FDR wins election, and he passes the second New Deal. And look at what happens here. Unemployment is about 22%. And then look at what happens in 1938. Unemployment goes up, and it goes up to about 27%. And so people start to wonder what's happening. We're spending all this money. Yes, I'm going to share the slides with you. Let me see if I can do that right now. Let me know if that works. If not, I'll have to log out. So FDR, where was I? Sorry. In 1938, unemployment goes up. And then look at what happens in 1939. Europe breaks out into war. And when Europe breaks out into war, unemployment in the US is about 25%. And this war is going, all right, it works. Awesome, Jason. So this war is going to completely change what's happening in the US. Ooh. Okay, so let's look at some of the second New Deal. Again, it's more agencies, more attempts to provide relief, recovery, and reform. And so here's some agencies that are passed during FDR's second New Deal. Some of these are similar to the ones passed during the first New Deal. First, he wants to help workers, passing farm relief and rural development. For this ones, I just wrote the acronyms. You can see them in the New Deal agency handout that I have. He wants to extend relief. He wants to improve working conditions by the Wagner Act and the Fair Labor and Standards Act. And he wants to expand reform, essentially getting into unemployment. I don't know if you guys saw this today, but today there was a big deal in the news. What was it that was a big deal today related to unemployment? Yeah, I mean, today, so Charlie, I'm going to put that question here in can you put that question in, hold on, I think actually I can add it. There we go. I'm going to post that in the post of questions because that's a great question. We can come back in a second. So unemployment this week, because of the coronavirus, we had 3.2 million people in the United States file for unemployment. Normally, you have 300 or 400,000 people. This means that it's about 10 times more people are filing for the unemployment, which means what happens when unemployment starts to go up? You're headed into, starts with the R, a recession. Correct. And if a recession continues, then you fall into a depression. And so this is what's happening in the United States as we're living. So all these things that FDR had to deal with high unemployment, stimulus, and all this is things that we're living in right now. So that's why when you see it today, and there were 3.2 million people that lost their jobs in the United States, you know that we're headed towards a recession. And I know that's depressing, but it's the truth. And unless they get rid of the coronavirus in the week, which doesn't look like it's going to happen, to just the truth hurts. It does hurt. But we're all in this together, guys. Don't worry. We're all in this together. It is worrisome. But what I'm trying to do is really relate what's happening now to what happened with FDR, because you can see a lot of parallels. History is about seeing, like, how does the past help us understand what the present? And so when you see Donald Trump and you see the Congress right now passing a stimulus package, is because they're trying to avoid this. They're trying to avoid falling into a recession and then a depression. All right, so essentially we're almost done here, and then I'm going to take some questions. And actually, I want to challenge you guys, because I don't have Charlotte had a question about the Glass-Steagall Act. If somebody can put an answer on there for her, then we can come back to it at the end. I'll task it to somebody, and then we'll come back at the end. So look at what happens in 1939. We have dictators fighting all over Europe. The United States does not want to get involved, but Hitler is going all through Europe and taking over Poland, taking over France, and the United States is kind of hands off. But it does start to send supplies to Britain. And so its economy does slowly start to churn out supplies. And so in 1940, look at unemployment. In 1941, the United States gets attacked by Japan. And does anybody know where we got attacked? Pearl Harbor. Exactly. All right. So you're right. This is a great point right there, Jack. We were in isolation from 1939 to 1941. In 1941, the United States is attacked by Pearl Harbor. The United States declares war on Japan, and it declares war on Germany, and the entire economy turns to the war effort. And then look at what happens to unemployment when all of a sudden, all those factories, all those women, all those men that were sitting there unemployed are now making machine guns. They're fighting in the war. They're making their doctors, their medics. Look at unemployment. What is it in 1942? Jack, I'm going to publish this answer Jack put here because this is exactly right. World War II. World War II is what gets us out of the depression. And so there's a lot of speculation, and I'll go back because we're almost done here, guys, was the New Deal worth it? So if you look at the New Deal, actually, you know what? I want to take a volunteer, a brave young man or woman to come onto the stream and just talk to me real quick. Do you think the New Deal was worth it? Did FDR's New Deal get us out of the depression? Any brave person want to come on the stream? Come on, guys. Thumbs up. Yes, I can bring you on the stream. Okay, Sierra, would you be willing to come on here and talk about it a little bit? I have a couple questions for you. Come on, guys, cheer somebody on. Sierra, all right. You can do it from the chat. You're right. Sarah, let's do it. I'm going to bring you on. All right. So I'm going to invite you. You're going to get an invitation and then just accept it. Then we'll talk about this just like two people. All right. Don't worry. We're going to talk about that. So I just invited you on the screen. And so go ahead and accept while we're talking about this, and then we're almost done, guys. Hey, Saba, how are you? Thank you so much for coming on the stream.
No problem. I don't know anything.
No, but you're great. Where are you? Where are you at right now?
I'm at home in my living room on my couch.
Okay, so what state are you in?
California.
California. What city?
Los Angeles. Actually, Culver City, but LA.
All right, Culver City. I used to live right by Culver City.
Really? That's cool.
And so tell me, how long have you been in the quarantine?
Oh God, I lost count after like 10 days.
So Saba, what have you been doing to entertain yourself? Like, what
A
is,
lot of
are you having classes online?
A lot of Fiveable for sure.
All right, all right. Look, we didn't even plan that, all right? She just plugged it in herself, all right?
Yeah.
So let me ask you a couple questions. Now, we went through the screen. And first, let me ask you, what school do you go to?
Culver City High.
Okay, Culver City High.
Yeah.
And how many APs are you taking?
4.
Whoa! And are you planning to take all the APs this year?
Yes, sir.
All right, you're awesome. All right. So let me, now that you look at the New Deal, and we're talking about the unemployment and the stock market crash, what do you think? What did the New Deal make a difference?
I think 100%, because like Hoover was all about, you know what, like we're gonna let it go, it's gonna go away by itself and all that. But then, it was just getting worse and worse and worse. And then FDR comes in and is all like, yo, here are a whole bunch of these agencies that have 3 letters, and they're gonna fix everything, and they really fixed everything. So.
Yeah, but I mean, what if I say, and I'm just going to push back a little bit. What if I say, well, the New Deal didn't get us out of the depression; it was the World War II. And so, what was the point of doing all this stuff if World War II was going to get us out of the depression? Why did we have to do that? At the end, maybe Hoover was right. We did pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps.
Mm-hmm. No, I think. Oh, can I first ask a question? When was the Dust Bowl?
It was right during this period, during the 1930s.
Okay. Well, let me give you this scenario. So it's the Dust Bowl. People are hungry. People are dying because they're malnutritioned or whatever, if that's a word.
It
And they have no hope. They're running out of anything that the government is doing. I know, like, there were many agencies or whatnot or companies that like would give free food, but that wasn't enough. So when the government intervened before the war and they pushed for this little help or whatever, I feel like that's what made the people believe in their government, and it like set like the stage that, you know what, like the government will get us out of this, we will get better, things will happen. And it just happened that World War II was happening and it provided jobs.
Well, let me ask you, because you have a great point, and I'm not disagreeing. I just wanted to ask you that. But do you think it's the government's role to, like, every time there's a hardship, it's the government's job to get us out of things?
If it's not the government's job, then why does the government exist?
Well, that's a question with a question. That's a good point. Well, you know what? I don't have a direct answer. The government is supposed to do other things, but if it's supposed to just help, she is on fire. The chat is going on fire for you. We know that you won.
Nice, thank you.
Got me roasted. So no, you're absolutely right. So I want you to. Were you able to download the handout that I got on there?
Yeah, I have them both.
Okay, Saba. Well, first I want to thank you so much for coming on here. I want to thank you for spending your Thursday night with me and studying. Look, I can't say enough about what an amazing student would come on here and spend their time on their own to do this, and that says a lot about you. Okay?
It's coronavirus.
Coronavirus. So I want you to stay safe. And I'm not your teacher at your school, but I know if my students were taking the initiative that you're doing, I'd be so proud. So thank you.
Mr. Owens that. Yo, Mr. Owens.
I'm going to tell Mr. Owens. Shout out to Mr. Owens' class, all right?
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
For coming on.
Yeah, thank you for teaching us.
Oh, sorry. All right. Hey, sorry to come on in the chat. So, guys, I want to wrap it up today. I want to thank you guys. So I think it is worth arguing that the event that got us out of the depression was World War II. Although, just like Saba said, the New Deal did have an impact. And the government, FDR's New Deal did help unemployment decline. And did it help us bring it back to normal? No. But it did something. And so maybe the role of government is to do something to show us that it does. So guys, I want to thank you guys so much for spending your Thursday night. Oh, and I'm going to ask you a question. No, I've never seen anything exam and a lot of times, the programs go into each other, so they were renewed in the second year. Okay? So what I want you to, the next review is on Thursday, next Thursday. Oh, I'm so sorry, guys. So sorry for this muffled. I'm so sorry, guys. It means that it's probably time to wrap up the stream. Jason, guys, first I want to tell you guys before I go. I know this is really tough for AP students. I want to tell you why I do this. It's because I just want to help students during this tough time. I love connecting with students. I can't tell you how happy you made me that Saba came on here. Was brave enough to come on here, and all you guys for hanging in there with me tonight. I know these are tough times, but Bible will here for you guys. You don't have to stop learning. It's free, and please, just like Saba said, connect. So I want to wish you guys a good night. Thank you guys, and I'll see you next week, next Thursday at 9 o'clock Eastern time. Bye, everybody.